Hey guys, welcome to the tutorial. This is going to be your first After Effects tutorial. So with that being said, let's just get started. Everything that we go over in this tutorial, we will go over in class next week. This is just kind of a prequel, get your hands dirty, get you guys going in the program. So you can have questions for me next week after we go over this. Alright, so I've already opened a new project in After Effects, so if you have not done that, please do so now. The very first thing you'll notice is there's nothing in here. We have no footage, we have no video, and after all, this is a video editing program. You're probably wondering how we set this up. So the very first thing we're going to do here is go to the very top ribbon, and you'll see File, Edit, Composition. In After Effects, we're going to be working a lot with compositions. So let's start by clicking Composition and setting up a new comp. Let me drag this over here to the screen. And I will call compositions comps. That's just kind of the lingo for it. So don't get confused by that. Very first thing I preach is organization to you guys. So we need to make sure that every comp or every video we set up in here, we need to name it correctly. So for this one, we will call it First Project. And down here is going to be a whole bunch of presets that you can see, different types of video outputs, and we just want to come down here and customize it ourselves. So we can leave it at custom, and we want it to be 1920 by 1080. 30 frames per second is fine, and down here is actually the duration of what our video or composition is going to be. So we definitely want it to start at 00, and right now it says it's at 12 seconds, and that sounds about right. Let me get rid of this 2 here. So 12 seconds for your first video is fine. Now this background color here is going to be what your video is going to start off with as the color. It's going to be black. This will not render when we output this. It's automatically, no matter what color you change this to, I can change it to red, it will stay black when you render it. So just note that. I like to leave it black, it's easier on the eyes, and we're going to be filling that space up anyways. So once you have all these settings here, we're going to go ahead and click OK. Now, let me scroll out here. So I'm just going to click in this composition window, which you'll see composition, and it has our name of our comp. I'm going to scroll out, and this is going to be the 1920 by 1080 video that we're going to be creating. So, of course, we have nothing in there yet, and like what I was talking about, the colors, you'll see that it's black, and I recommend that. So let me kind of give you a quick rundown of all of the different panels and things that you guys will be using this semester. And just remember, I will be going over this in class next week. This is just a head start for you guys. So over here is going to be your project panel. So anytime I refer to the project panel, it's the far left over here. Anytime you make a composition, it's going to slide right in here or pop up right in here. Anytime you add a photo or a video or any other kind of file, you're going to either drag it into here or you'll double click like I just did and find a photo and upload it or import it, and it'll pop up here. Okay. So down here, this is going to be the timeline. Once we get things going, you'll see things popping up in the timeline, and this is actually where all the animation happens, is right in this timeline. We are right now starting at 00, and we're going all the way to 12 seconds because that's what we set our duration to. Over here, all I want you guys to get out of this assignment is we're going to pay attention to the character panel because we will be adding text to this. So you'll see over on the right hand panel, character. If you do not see that, that's fine. Just make sure you go to the window and make sure character is selected or checked. Alright, so let's get started. We have the project panel over here. We have the timeline down here. We have our composition panel here. And over here we have our character. And all the rest of the stuff we'll get into later on, but right now this is the only thing I want you to see. So, with that being said, this is the ribbon up here at the top. This is where we can do a lot of selections, and depending on what you're working on, your tools are going to be up here. So let's see, you'll see up here that we have this type tool, and it's going to be the same as you see in Photoshop, Illustrator, any of those other programs that you've worked in. And we're going to go ahead and click, and now you'll see the cursor has that text icon, and we're going to pop it into the composition panel and click. Let's say my first project, and obviously the text is a little small, so I'm going to go over here to the character panel and I'm going to up this. Now I'm going to just kind of center this, and it's still a little too small for me, and I have this set for a project I was doing a while ago, so we try to make this everything be 100 and 0. Let's see here. Okay, so now I have this basically centered, and so you should say my first project. If it's all caps like mine is, it's because you probably have this all caps button down here. So I do recommend taking a look at all these. You have the fake bold, the italic, all caps, small caps. I usually like to work in all caps, and that's just because I'm used to working on LED signs, which you need big, bold letters, and there's no better way to do that than having all caps. So anyways, I'm getting off course a little bit here. So we're going to have this centered as best as you can, and there are other ways to center this, but we'll go down that road later on. I want to go over how we're going to animate this. So right now you can see it moving, but there's nothing happening, right? You will notice though that down here in our timeline panel, we did get my first project, the text, to pop up down here, and this layer. So this is just going to be just like Illustrator and Photoshop as layers. If I were to add another text layer, actually, let's go in here and add a shape. So up here on the ribbon, you will see shapes. I want to add a star. So if you click on this, hold down, you can drag out to the star tool. Holding the shift button, you're going to make sure that shift is held, or else you're going to get non-conformed. So make sure you use shift, and you'll notice that it's black, and we don't want black. We're going to go up here to the fill tool, and let's make this a yellow. So this is where you can add the fill, and this is where you can add a stroke if you wanted to. So you don't have to do this, I'm just showing you. And we'll notice that it's covering up our text now. We'll also notice that we added another layer down here, and it's going to be called Shape Layer 1. I want this star to be behind my text, so the very first thing I'm going to do, as in Photoshop or Illustrator, is I'm just going to drag it below. So now you will see, if I zoom in here, my first project is over star. So topmost layer is very top, bottommost layer bottom, pretty basic. And so now we have two different elements in our composition. And like I said, composition is basically what our video is going to be once we render it out. For now, I'm just going to make this star a little smaller. Holding the shift button, I'm going to grab one of these corners and put it over here and put it down in this bottom corner so we can see our text. So now let's get into how we're going to animate this. And this is all I want you guys to grasp this week. And let's select our text. So the very first thing we're going to do here is, with your text selected, hit P on your keyboard, and you should see position pop up. So now that we have the position, you'll see these are the actual coordinates that it is in the composition. This stopwatch is going to be your keyframe tool. So once we click this, you'll see in the timeline over here that a little keyframe, or a little diamond, blue diamond, popped up. This is going to be the starting position of the animation. So I'm going to come out here and say, hey, I want this to show up here in the center at 2 seconds, right? So I'm going to go and click another keyframe here. Keep in mind that if you were to click this stopwatch again, and I'll just do this as an example, it will delete all your keyframes. So once you have this keyframe started, make sure you don't touch the stopwatch again, or else it'll delete everything. Instead, you'll be adding keyframes this way, or as I'll show you another way right now. With 2 seconds here selected, I'm going to go back to the 0, and I'm going to drag this off the screen. And as I do that, you will see this line here. That is going to be our animation path. So that's the path that this text is going to follow in the animation. So since I had this set at 2 seconds here, if I go back and press spacebar to replay this, you'll see it comes onto the screen and stops right where we had that last keyframe selected. So we will be going over keyframes quite a bit next week. That's going to be the big focus, but I want you to grasp what keyframes do. So what it does is, for anybody with non-animation experience, this fills in the gap between the 2 points that you set. So with that being said, that's the position. So make sure that you have your animation coming in from the top and stopping somewhere in the center, and we'll call that good there. The next hotkey that you're going to want to remember is S. So hit S on your keyboard and it'll be S for scale. Scale is going to be the size of your element, and in this case text. So I'm going to go ahead and start a animation. I'm going to hit this keyframe enabler, stopwatch, and you'll see that another keyframe started. I want this to go back to the center where it's off the screen, and we're going to make this 0. So I'm just going to type in 0, or you can drag it. It doesn't matter how you want to do it. I just like to type it in. So now that we have this, let's see what we have. It's going to be scaling in, coming down, and you'll see that's doing both at the same time. Perfect. The third one that we are going to do is going to be R. So hit R on your keyboard, and this is going to be R for rotation. Make sure we enable the stopwatch to turn the keyframes on, and we'll come here, and you'll see that down here you have your rotation. We want to do let's just do a 360. So you can either type in 360 here, or you can just do 1 here, which will be a full complete spin. So now when we have our animation, if we go back to the beginning with the time cursor and hit spacebar, we're starting to get some life to this animation. So now we have this coming in. There's still one left, one hotkey that I need you guys to remember. So we have position is P, scale is S, rotation is R. The last one is kind of different. It's going to be T. Now T is going to be opacity. So with my cursor at this 2 second mark, I'm going to go ahead and hit the stopwatch, put a keyframe down. I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to turn this to 0. So think of opacity as the opposite of transparency. So if it's 100% transparent, you are not going to be able to see it correctly. But if it is 100% opaque, then it's going to be 100% visible. So with that being said, it's coming in and it is fading in. You can't really see it as much because it's off, half of it's happening off the screen. But so we have that coming in, and now we have a decent animation for your first animation. While that sits there, the last thing I want you guys to get out of this is I should say, is let's animate this star across the screen. So I'm going to leave this one up to you however you want to animate it across the screen, but I want it starting off the screen, and for me I'm just going to do position, I'm going to do a scale, and I'm going to go across here and drag. You can drag this way. So this is another way to animate. So you can either animate down here using these, or you can actually go to the screen here, and I'm going to hold shift, whoops, that's not shift, hold shift and drag across the screen. And what you'll see is my first project, the star comes in and gets bigger as it goes across the screen. Okay, so once we have our animations done, with the star going off the screen, however you guys wanted to do it, it's time to start rendering it. And by rendering it, we're gonna send it to a different program. It's also an Adobe program, but basically what it's gonna do is take this After Effects file and convert it to a video format. And in our case, we're gonna be working with MP4s. But there's one thing that we need to do before we get to that point, and that is, you'll notice that we set our duration to 12 seconds at the beginning. And, I thought this animation might be a little longer, but since it's the first one, it ended up only being right below 5 seconds. So now there's two ways to go about this. If we were to render it now, it's going to render everything, and we'll have just a standstill screen saying my first project for the remainder of the time. And we don't want that. We want it to render only the workspace, which is this blue bar here, this work area end. So now there's a few ways to go about this. We can trim this to, let's just say, 5 seconds, and it will render just what is in this work area. And then it will replay to the beginning. And so that's what we want. The other way to get this to 5 seconds, if this was back at 12, is we can either hit Control K or go up here to your composition settings. Let me show you. So Control K, composition settings, same thing, and change the duration here to 5 seconds. So we can say 5, and that's going to trim it. Or if we wanted to, I'm just going to go to 3 seconds for this example, is hit N. N will automatically, N as in Nancy, will automatically trim to that area. I'm a hotkey guy. If you haven't noticed yet, I like to use hotkeys. It's a faster workflow, and I will be recommending that you guys do the same. But for now, we just wanted it 5 seconds, so I'm just going to drag this work area to 5 seconds, and now we are ready to render. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go up here to File, and we're going to go to Export. Once you go to this Export button, you'll see Add to Adobe Media Encoder, and that's what we're going to want to do. So we'll click that. You should see something like this. Media Encoder CC should be launching. Now, I'll give you the spiel about the Media Encoder. There is an actual render queue that you can do inside of After Effects, but we don't use that because it will also take control of After Effects, and you won't be able to work on any projects while it's rendering. Using this Media Encoder, let me delete this Arby's ad here. Using this Media Encoder allows it to render in this program. That way we still have the capability of working in After Effects and not having to wait for a render. So we want to make sure that H.264 is our selection. So H.264, which is an MP4 format. The match source high bitrate, that's fine. And then we'll click here on our output file path, and we'll just save it to wherever you're wanting to save it. So it's going to say my first project, and we'll hit save. And then there's either enter or this little green play button up here will start the render. This will be a really fast render because there's not a lot of elements in the video and it's only 5 seconds long. But once it gets longer, you'll see time remaining down here, and it could get up to a few hours once we get into our bigger projects. So just note that rendering does take time, does take class time, so plan accordingly. Now, that is done, so I'm just going to click this output file. I'm going to go find it. We'll see it here, my first project. I'm going to double click it to watch it and make sure everything looks good. Alright, that's what I wanted. Okay, once you're done with that, go ahead and turn it in on Canvas and you're good to go for this week. Come up with any questions you may have next week, and I will be going over all of this again. Make sure this is completed, and any questions you have, I'll be ready to answer. Thanks.